If we don't make time for play, we're not making time for growth. The stakes for failure as you become an adult are higher and higher. So where do you get a chance to fail? I don't think you can take big shots inside a company. Like, are you going to take a big shot at this company? I was pretty upset about it. Thought, well, I can either sign up and go back to work again for a big company, or I could go build my own thing.
Bernard Yee is the CEO and co-founder of Windup Minds. Windup Minds is a game studio building the next generation of virtual pets in mixed reality. This is where you'll meet your forever companion. He has worked in companies like Meta/Oculus, PopCap, Bungie, Harmonix.
And it's so funny to me, we talk about a year of efficiency. Technically, program managers and TPMs, they are actually trying to get efficiency.
So this idea of creating a virtual pet, an AI that is somewhat inscrutable, but is chosen to be related to the player, was really powerful. I don't think of ourselves as a VR company. I think of ourselves as, you ever feel lonely and you want like your pet to check in on your pet and play with it? Like, I want you to be able to do that.
Hello, welcome to the Priyanka Shinde Podcast, where we dive into the art and science of strategy, execution, and leadership. I'm your host, Priyanka Shinde, author of The Art of Strategic Execution and a consultant for tech leaders. In this podcast, I bring you candid conversations with top executives, startup founders, and industry experts who are driving innovation, delivering results, and staying ahead in today's competitive landscape. We will break down what it takes to tap into founder mode and turn vision into action. If you are serious about elevating your leadership and execution skills, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. It helps the podcast and ensures you never miss an episode. Hi everyone, welcome to the Priyanka Shinde Podcast. Today I'm talking to a startup founder who has a gaming background. Bernard Yee is currently the CEO and co-founder of Windup Minds, a VR/MR games startup. In the almost 9 years at Oculus and Meta Reality Labs, he has been the senior TPM on Orion's AR games and consumer experiences, executive producer on the Oculus REX game, the team behind the seminal VR experiences for multiple generations of hardware, Dream Deck, showcasing final shipping optics and tracking, Toybox, exploring social presence in a shared VR space, Farlands, a launch game for the Rift, Prologue, an introduction to VR for the Gear VR, First Contact, hand presence via the Oculus touch controllers, First Steps, Quest launch standalone VR playable, and proof of experiences using Quest hand tracking technologies. Bernie has worked in the game industry on a wide variety of games and genres in both development and publishing roles at PopCap. He was the lead producer on Plants vs. Zombies 2 and Peggle 2. Prior to moving to Seattle, Bernie worked at Harmonix, which is the producer of Rock Band, Atari, and Sony Online Entertainment. He also taught game design and production at Columbia University School of Engineering and Applied Science. Wow, Bernie, that's such an amazing career you have had. Welcome to the show. I'm incredibly excited to have you and this conversation.
Thanks, Priyanka. That just tells you I'm old and hard to kill.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your journey. I mean, you have had such an incredible career across like VR and AR and all of these game developments. I mean, I know Atari, when you talk of Atari, it does feel like ages ago. What initially drew you to this space and what has been this journey like?
That's a good question. I'm older, right? So I started my journey in technology as a child who taught himself how to program on a TRS-80. Back in the early 80s, there was no real commercial software industry, right? If you had a home computer, of which nothing had like that ever existed before, you had to kind of teach yourself to write, especially if you're a kid, you don't have money. You have to teach yourself to write the programs you want to play. And like every kid, I want to play video games. So I taught myself how to code to write them. And that sort of gave me a foundation of at least understanding technology on a fundamental level and having to live through a really difficult era where you had to, print out your source code so you could debug it line by line. Like, it was really brutal. But it taught me a lot about writing code and how to develop software, just on a very fundamental level that I think, in some ways only children really get. If you're neuroplastic enough as a child and you absorb these lessons, I think they stay with you for a long time. So I was lucky enough to get
Mm.
that early in. But I also, during that time, there wasn't really an obvious career in computer science for me. Like I didn't want to be like a sweaty nerd sitting in a computer science lab, hoping to work for IBM after I graduate or Wall Street. So I went to liberal arts. I went to law school, and I found my way back, my way back to games. Because when you have a law degree from a top 10 law school and you work on Wall Street, people tend to take you seriously. I don't know that they should, but they do. And I understood the business side, understood the, logical thinking, understood games. I cared about it. So I had deep kind of domain knowledge and affinity for the stuff I was building. I wasn't just another suit with a business background hoping to make their mark in games. Um, and from there, I just sort of leveraged my curiosity into working on things that I think were really novel, right? So I got a chance to work on a massively multiplayer online game, EverQuest. I got to work on Rock Band, which is one of those plastic instrument games, which was I still think one of the best games of all time. I leveraged that and ended up working at Bungie and moved to Seattle, and then PopCap, where I shipped Plants vs Zombies 2. So a lot of Plants vs Zombies 2 was Electronic Arts' first foray into free to play games. So I always tried to be doing something interesting. And that led me to Oculus, right? So I joined Oculus before the acquisition, and Oculus was trying to build a new computing platform, a new way of interacting with software. And when I got a VR demo, I was just so moved by it emotionally.
Mhm.
Um, I said, like, I'd love to do this. And then, but I was at PopCap, so there's no way PopCap's ever going to do this. And then Nate Mitchell, one of the Oculus co-founders, called me and said, "Hey, we have a team in Seattle building out all these playable experiences, and we need a producer. Do you want to come and interview for it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to do that." So I never looked back after that. So that was kind of my journey, right? Self-taught, kind of orthogonal backgrounds. I've been a journalist. I've been a lawyer. I've been a fiction writer. And I came sort of all these things kind of led back to games and then VR. So it's a little bit circuitous, and it's taken me most of a lifetime. But here we are.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, the law school thing wasn't even there in the intro that we talked about, and that was already a huge amount of things that you have done. And that's amazing is how you have had these varied experiences or even like education that is not even gaming. And you said it kind of brought you back to gaming always. Can you share like a pivotal moment, maybe early in your career, that really shaped your approach to how you thought of games, or maybe just coming back to gaming?
Yeah. I mean, I think the things I experienced playing games was I got a chance to review a lot of them, like as a journalist, uh, and just seeing playing the number of products that existed allowed me to sort of create this pattern matching of what was powerful. And when I the best games I played moved me to understand that play is this fundamental condition of human beings, um, and that we lose sight of that as we get older, right? So when you have children, children learn the world through play, right? You don't send them out to the work world or like drive a car or cut some vegetables. You let them play at all these experiences first, right? With like toy knives and little toy cars and doll houses. Um, and I realized as I was playing these sort of more and more sophisticated games built on simulation that we were exercising this muscle that I used to exercise as a child. Um, and I noticed myself separating from a lot of my peers, age-wise, who stopped playing. And I resolved that I never wanted to do that, right? Because I think if play is how we understand the world, when does the world become so finite that you need to stop understanding it, right? It always is complex. It is always changing. And play is a great lever to understand it. So I think that was this moment where I realized like I was very different than a lot of my peers. Like I went to an elite high school in New York City called Bronx High School of Science. went to Columbia University, right? These are like high leverage institutions with people who are high achievement. But I wasn't. Like there was something about what I wanted to do, which is very different than what they wanted to do. And I'm not diminishing what they wanted to do. I just think that like the vast majority of adults stop playing. And I think that that's
Mm.
terrible. Like I think that makes us if we don't make time for play, we're not making time for growth, right? So growth only happens when you fail. Um, the stakes for failure as you become an adult are higher and higher. So where do you get a chance to fail? In your relationship with
Play.
your partner? No. At work? No. Raising kids? No. Like you don't want to fail in any of those things. So where do you get a chance to fail? Where do you get a chance to grow? And if you're not playing, you're certainly not getting a chance, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is like realizing this thing that I don't want to let the play go away from me, and this whole like becoming an adult, and I put it in
Right.
quotation marks here. Um, that seems like that turning point, because yes, you were in actually very serious areas before, law or business, and in these elite schools. And what's really struck me here is also the ability to have that awareness so early and say, I'm going to go do this something different. Because a lot of time for people, the lifetime goes away, and in their 40s, 50s is when they're like, I spent working on something that was just like, it wasn't a passionate thing, or um, and so to have that realization earlier so you could make what you want out of your career is really incredible. I'm really inspired by that.
I mean, it happens slowly over time, but you certainly notice when the things you do start differing from the things the rest of your peers do, right? And you ask
Mhm.
yourself, why is my path a little bit different? Why are people making more money than me, or why are people have these like high powered careers and I'm doing something a little bit more orthogonal to that? So
Yeah.
but it kind of, it lands on the things that make you happy and the things that you get attracted to. And like the idea of play has always been, I spent a lot of time as a child playing, even though I went to academic institutions. I thought play was a big part of that. And um,
Mm.
I couldn't help but notice as you get older, like adults are like, oh, why do you play video games, right? Like it's a waste of time. Um, and I think that I'd always ask like, well, if it's a waste of time, why do I love it so much? And what itch is it scratching in me that makes me do it? And
Mhm.
also teaching game development and game design, like it made you think about what are these behavioral loops that are being reinforced over and over again. Um,
Yeah.
all right, so that's I mean, it didn't hit me all at once, but it was definitely this awareness of like how my path diverged from a lot of my peers.
Right. 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 That is amazing, and I'm sure it wasn't easy for you. Like I'm sure there have must have been challenging times as you were making that pivot. Like, can you share something that has been really challenging um, in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I think one of the interesting things, I mean, one of the more challenging things that happened was when I was laid off from Meta in November of 22. Um, I had contributed quite a bit to the development of VR and XR through the things I shipped, both outside in the community and to Mark and Boz and leadership there. Um, but as Meta got larger, I think my ability to be seen uh, got more diluted um, in committees and groups and layers of bureaucracy. So when I got laid off, I was like, wow, this is really, I'd done all this work. Like I had led a major um, core technology reevaluation for Orion, like the half before I got laid off. No TPM had ever done anything like that before. Um, and it didn't save me from it, right? So, I always knew that work was somewhat is transactional, right? I show up, they pay me, I do work. Um, but I expected more. Like I expected that my years of leadership and thought leadership and product and program management would give me more than that. Um,
Mhm.
on the other hand, like I also know that companies are not humans; they're not people. They make their own decisions in a way that is it is. opaque to a human being, right? Because a group of people, any group of people thinks differently as a collective than a single person, and a group of 30,000, whatever, it has its own mind. So like I was pretty thrown. I was pretty upset about it for a little while, and I thought, well, like I can either sign up and go back to work again for a big company, and I got some offers from big companies, um, or I could go build my own thing, like put my money where my mouth is, right? So if you think you can do better, you should go do better. And I'd gotten to a point in my career where I had the sort of resources and the network and the people around me to do that. So um, I took what I think is for a big risk in that, I certainly don't have um, a vast amount of savings that I could just live off of easily. But is to start a company. And I think, we started the company 2023. So it was not an easy time, right? It was not easy to raise money. It was, um, and they say that the best companies are born in the hardest times. And so if that's true, um, if we survive, I think we will be, we will have the sort of discipline and focus that it took. Um,
Yeah.
but yes, I think that's the hard moment of like, you contributed all to this company. I mean, Boz still in interviews, he had an interview with Matthew Ball like 4 months ago where he said the work that my team did was really sort of exemplary of telling the story of what the possibility space of the medium looked like. And what he didn't say, but I think what is implied, is that the medium has not lived up to the promise that my team started to show. Or else, if it did, we wouldn't be wondering why VR isn't big yet, right? So despite that, right, it didn't save me from getting laid off. The fact that, people
Mhm.
still refer to my work, my team's work internally as like setting a standard, right? Like that didn't save me. And it's that sort of
Yeah.
realization that the work you do in large companies has limited value, even when it's very powerful,
Mm.
even when Mark spent hours inside Toy Box in a social VR experience, and that doesn't matter, right? Um,
You bring up such a good point. I mean, you have done one is the challenge you picking is very recent in spite of having such a long career. And you've worked on so much valuable stuff. And a lot of times when layoffs happen, irrespective of, I mean, it's a decision by the company, they're making that decision, they choose certain people. We actually really, it's a black box. We don't understand how these decisions are made. People can tend to feel a lot of self-doubt in that moment. And I'm sure a lot of people may not have even worked on some of the stuff that you have worked on, which gets referenced in interviews today. And I'm sure it was still so hard for you. And it's like, how could I get laid off after having contributed so much? So thank you for sharing that story. And I'm sure it was, I mean, it's great to see you start your own company, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm sure that process after November 22 wasn't easy for you.
no, I mean, it's funny because there are two examples I think about, um, people always talk about the Darwinian evolution of survival of the fittest, and it's a very good like elementary school lesson, but it's really not accurate, right? Like you could be the most well-adapted, fittest fish living in an ocean or a sea by a volcano, and if the volcano erupts, it doesn't matter how well you're evolved. Like you're gone, it's done, it's over, right? Things can happen despite the sort of your fitness to survive that are beyond your control. Um, and I race bikes at the velodrome, which is one of those physical pursuits that I think is really valuable to have. Um, and I can make a lot of good local decisions, but if something happens, like 3 riders in front of me and I don't catch it, right? Like that they let a gap open or there's a crash. Like it didn't matter what, made good decisions at that point. Like the board gets shuffled. The deck gets shuffled over and over again. So
Mm.
um, one of the things that I think as an athlete I've always been told is like you control your controllables. So like what's under your control versus what's not in your control. And I think we have an illusion that we control more than we think we do. and then we ignore the stuff we can actually control. And there's a lot of things like I couldn't, the VP who ran the AR group, Alex Himmel, like I couldn't control him. Like I never had a one-on-one with him. Like I never talked to him. So it's out of my control. Like I tried, right? But in like large later stage reality labs, it wasn't like the early days where I could just go to Brendan or Nate, the founders, and like, hey man, I'm in Menlo Park. Can we spend a little time talking about this thing? Like, yeah, sure, find some time. And you know, I would grab that time. Like that was it was a different time, right? So what was in my control, right, which is what leadership thought, became less under my control when Hugo came in and became the head of VR, and then less under my control when Boz came in, and then even less under control when Boz and now Alex came in, right? Like, so these people didn't know me really. You know, Boz knows me, but only very like by only reputation, not personally. So like what was under my control was no longer under my control, and I tried to exert some influence and to spend some time, but that like never happened. So so the board got redefined, and I had to understand what was under my control, and a lot of stuff not under your control. So why wring your hands over stuff's not in your control? Like either it is or it isn't, right? You might as well say like, please volcano, don't erupt. And the fish doesn't really matter, right? Like a fish has no control over it. So um that's what, you know, that's how I coped with that, is understanding what was under my control.
And that's really great advice as well, is you can only control so much, and it's no use worrying about like things you cannot control. I wanted to touch upon the work of a TPM, because that's the role you were in at Meta Reality Labs. For those who don't know, TPM stands for Technical Program Manager or Technical Program Management. And it's not necessarily a very well understood function. I'm sure when you went into Oculus, you were an executive producer or like a producer, and then some of the role transition happened where it had to fit into certain things that were defined at the company in terms of roles. And producer is a very common in gaming industry, but not so common in other industries. Do you think being in the title of a TPM somehow, I mean, one is, what was your experience with the role at the company? And do you think the lack of understanding around it led to the November 2022
Oh yeah,
events?
absolutely. Like I think Mark, you know, wanted that year of efficiency. He wanted to cut out management, middle management, and I think he saw TPMs as middle managers. It's funny because I became a TPM because Nate Mitchell was who hired me at Oculus. Like, what do you want to be? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm a producer. Like, we don't have those roles here. So how about program manager? And I was like, that sounds okay. I'll do that. I had no idea, right? And in reality, actually, at Meta, like product managers have all the sort of final say. I think in theory, a product manager and a program manager should be joined at the hip, right? They should be checks and balances on each other. And you can't have checks and balances if one has hierarchical power over the other, right? So like that relationship is already mismatched. So I think like a lot of technical program management, because of that mismatch, what I noticed among my fellow TPMs is they became data reporters and not data analysts. Yeah, so TPM, like, and I think once you have a power imbalance, right, you lose the ability to really be about check on product. And product, because they're separated from execution, they can make kind of grand pronouncements about what we should be doing without actually having to live through the life in the trenches. And when you have that separation, and one is more powerful than the other, you lose the ability to keep each other in check, which means you become, you know, to me, what I observed was TPMs at Meta became data reporters, not data analysts. Here's how long it's going to take, or here's the execution path, and here are the risks, but you never really say, but I think this is screwed up. Like this is not good, right? And here's why. No one wants to make that conclusion. So you report the data. Like, and if anyone ever says like, well, you don't report the data, like, no, I did. Like, this is the data we have. But no one wants to give bad news. No one wants to say push another group into action, because if I give you bad news to the product managers, they can't execute on their OKRs, and then they're gonna be mad, and they're gonna take it out on you and your PSC cycle. And now you see what happens when there's bad PSC, you get laid off. Like, this is all like this is a bad scenario for actual collaboration. So, and I think that,
Right.
when you're building, like, I can't speak for the Blue app, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp side, but like all the stuff on Reality Labs is hyper new. Like, it's never been done, which means it's not like a creative development, like plus one, plus one, plus one. It's like giant step changes. So how do you make giant step changes? You got to take some big swings, right? Because it's not like, if I improved Facebook ad, feed by 0.01%, I've made the company like $1 billion or whatever, right? Like $100 million. But that's not possible. Like, if I improve the sort of UX click through of the Oculus store, I've barely done anything.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of like push and pull doesn't exist, because there's a disparity of power and influence. Like, what TPM gets to meet with Boz? None. Engineering? Sure. Product? Sure. TPM? Never. Not that I know of. Certainly on the Orion program, the TPMs were shut out of all the big meetings, as far as I could tell. And what does that tell you, right? Like, you are literally middle management. If you're not adding value by pointing out big changes, big risks, then you are not adding value. And maybe he's right to lay them off. Like, I think we were a victim of our own kind of, I would say, victimhood, right? Like, we didn't want to take any chances. We didn't want to rile people up. And this is what happens, is people don't see you add value, right? And that's what I think happened.
At the same time, you're also like you have led a large initiative. You were doing a lot of great work, and you were still not getting those opportunities to be known for the work you were doing. And so that power mismatch, where product is viewed as the only person that is doing everything, and all the other work is sort of like hidden away, or at least the person doing the work is hidden away, um, can really be problematic, because not all TPMs who come into the role know that this is not the right way to operate. They think, though, this is how it's supposed to be. And so I feel like it becomes a vicious loop where, because the company doesn't understand the role of the TPM, because there is the power imbalance, the TPM role is sort of, denigrated to this, like you're saying, a status report or something like that, which is not what it is supposed to be. And then when new TPMs come in, that's what they see, and then they start doing the same thing. And so eventually, like, the thing becomes that that's what the role is supposed to be. And you do get a lot of people in the role thinking, okay, how hard can it be? That's what I'm supposed to do. And so then it also makes it worse. The problem becomes worse. And I feel like, yeah, it's really misunderstood. And it's so funny to me. We talk about year of efficiency, and technically program managers and TPMs, they are actually trying to get efficiency. Like, all I say, yeah, exactly. It's like we aim for efficiency, effectiveness, productivity. Like, what is not there to understand? And yeah, I think it's the setup is not great. And I've seen this. I mean, I had been in multiple organizations at Meta. Um, I used to be in ads. I used to be in Messenger. I then went on to AR, VR, before it became Reality Labs. And I saw TPM being utilized or defined or understood differently in every team I
Yeah.
went in.
Yeah.
And even I would say, I mean, it's not like a brag story, but like similar to you, when we did the launch of the Facebook Assistant on Portal devices and Oculus, especially with Portal, like, we were 6 months out, nothing was working, and there were no program managers in the mix. I mean, there were some on the Portal side with the QA and things like that, but there was nobody one tying everything end to end. And I mean, I got into that program and we delivered somehow the first version of it. And there were product managers, there were engineering tech leaders. There were, in fact, 3 different organizations with 3 of those on from each of them. And it wasn't ready for release. And you're right, it's the hard things that TPMs have to do, which is tell them the truth. This is not going to ship. This is not great quality. And I think that's kind of becomes the missing thing. Um, but yeah, it's really unfortunate of what you share and your experiences with the role as well.
There's a joke in game development is the first 80% of the game takes 80% of the time, and the last 20% of the game takes the other 80% of the time, right? Like getting that last moment, that to something that's consumer quality to ship is expensive. And I think this idea that we can move fast and break things and ship an MVP, like for Reality Labs, we stopped, at least a group of us stopped talking about MVP and started talking about MLP, minimum lovable product, right? Because we have to elicit like an emotional reaction to people. It should feel useful to them. It should feel delightful. It should feel like subversive of what they expect in technology, and that's hard, right? And I don't know that people know how to get there. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult. And when you challenge people's perception of what we need to ship, it results in a lot of hard feelings because a lot of people built their career or their roadmap on a bunch of assumptions. And if you're going to take them away, you're going to upset a lot of people, right?
Mhm.
And one of the big things I did was I challenged one of the core part of the tech stack for Orion, saying like, I don't think we made the right decision. And we did a whole analysis, and people were really upset. So the leadership was upset that I made this decision. But it was hard to argue because I had so much experience in multiple tech stacks involving 3D interactive rendering and engines. And after the analysis, we're like, yeah, the one we chose isn't the right one, and they switched. And I said, actually, switching to the one you did has its own problems. But because the one we switched to was Spark, which was an internal product, no one wanted to hear it, right?
Mhm.
Like, even though I had a bunch of data. So that's the thing is I always say is like data or code wins arguments. Like, that's not true. Like we had a lot of data years ago that Spark was not going to be a viable, robust enough development iteration environment for developers to use. And of course, the Spark team was against that, right? Because I was saying like, hey, the core technology your team owns is not the right one for this application. It's not personal. It's not, I'm not trying to take food out of your children's mouths, which might happen as a result of this. But it was an empirical analysis of like development velocity and iteration speed. And it didn't matter because there's a whole group of people who are like fought it with tooth and nail because they didn't feel the safety of like, okay, if we pivot off of this engine or this choice, we still have jobs, right? Whatever, they, or I'm going to get a bad PSC and I'm not going to get I'm going to get a meets all at best, right? So all these like incentives worked against what was making a good technical decision. And, whatever, years later, they were like, they actually stopped using Spark. They said like, that wasn't really good. Like, yes, we told you this in 2020, 2021, like this is years ago, right? And I don't know how big the Spark team is. It is, let's say it's 30 people, and an average Facebook burn rate, like including stock and fully loaded employees, probably worth $600,000 a year, making it up, right? So what's 30 times 600,000 times 4 years? It's a lot of freaking money.
Mhm.
And then you opportunity
Yeah.
cost of not choosing the right engine choice to begin with, right? Like this is no longer, to me, it's no longer a rounding error. Like this is actually lost time, lost money. But at that point, the incentives didn't allow an open debate about the technical and feasibility of a certain code path versus another code path, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I get it. Like I'm not saying that if I was Spark, I wouldn't be fighting this, guy named Bernard Yee. I wouldn't be fighting him tooth and nail. Like, of course I would be. But so that's the thing. Like, I think I've probably been more honest than most people, but it was a pretty obvious decision. And I'm not saying anything that isn't now known, right? Is that they said Spark AR is no longer viable for this technology of wearable, glasses and AR devices, right?
Mhm.
They've killed it. So, there are a bunch of decisions I could talk about that, like that, where I brought to bear like technical pattern matching, but because it interfered with what engineering wanted to do or product wanted to do or whatever it was, I didn't have the seat at the table to be an equal to like a Sue Young or a Vlad or Don Box or these, senior VP engineering
Mhm.
product people, right? Like there was no one there to sort of be a foil to them, right?
Right.
No one to give me air cover to be assertive in that state, in that room.
The point you bring about incentives and them being misaligned can lead to so much trouble that it's almost like short-term short-sightedness, where you're just looking at the short-term gains instead of like thinking about, okay, it's like short-term that will be painful, but in the long run we'll be better off. And I think that short-sightedness really can, I'm sure Meta is a big company, they will survive it, but I'm sure like so many smaller companies or startups can actually die because of those kind of decisions and because the incentives are not lined up in the right
Yeah,
way.
I think that's true. And I think that's what Meta
Mhm.
has, is they have money and momentum. So even though they made up what I think was the wrong decision in 2020, they just roll over with money, right? Like they've got so much money, it doesn't matter, you know. And
Mhm.
what Boz might tell me is, Bernie, we made the right decision in 2 years anyway, and that's okay. And I
Yeah.
guess maybe it's
Yeah.
okay. Like, but for TPM, you're like, that's not okay. Like, we could have made this better decision 2 years ago. Like, why didn't we do that? And then we would have all these new
Yeah.
problems we'd be solving. So, um,
Uh-huh.
but I think, to look at the other way, like maybe it doesn't matter to them. Maybe losing 2 years of progress is okay. Because like you said, they make so much money that it's not existential to them to get this decision right.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because if you
Yeah.
read like Bob, the leak of Boz's transcript of like, do work, care, give a damn, be on fire about your project. That's being on fire, is like, let's make the right decision every time. Let's really like lean into it. Like, let's not, pretend that we're Meta. We can survive a decision that puts us on the wrong technical path for 2 years. Like, that's not doing the work of
Mhm.
your lifetime. Like, which is it? So I
Mhm.
mean, I asked Boz, like, which is it? Do you
Yeah.
want? You're
Yeah.
saying one thing? Are the incentives aligned to deliver that, right? And in my case, I don't think I did not see it.
I think there are multiple things like that, right? Even like this whole most like I know this is like a separate topic. It's like this whole DEI thing that they are doing. I mean, what are the incentives? How are they lined up? Is it like what is the intent versus what is the outcome is very different. And I remember even with this whole Orion thing in 2020, I mean, that was 2020, we are in 2025. Orion is still not out, though the Ray-Ban things seems to be working out. And these things take time. But at the end of the day, you also want to like, there is Meta can afford the trial and error, I guess. And I'm sure like a startup, you're heading a startup now. It's hard for you to go through trial and error all the time like this because survivability of the company is so much on the line. Um, and I'm sure like I think companies set certain guidelines, values, and things like that to think about how it like what's the right way to do things, or at least what's the right thing to say versus then it's like what's the right thing to do, or like how am I going to do it. um so it's very interesting on how I think we could like talk a whole lot about just like how corporates operate. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit and ask you about like you now have your own startup. You founded the company. It still is tied to your love of gaming. So, what inspired this vision for Wind Up Minds? Having imaginary friends in the XR world, and how do you see it evolving?
You know, I didn't. consciously do this because a lot of like when you look back on things, it's hindsight, and in the time, and you're not recognizable. One of the things that Shigeru Miyamoto, who's a creative genius at Nintendo behind like Mario and Zelda and these great games, right? He used to talk about the inspiration he got for games was going outside, like get away from your computer and do things in real life. And a lot of the inspiration for building a virtual pet, came from my experience in VR, like building the early experiences where, it felt lonely, disconnected, and people could be scary, right? Like having someone in VR with you, even if they're simulated and synthetic, still felt like someone was in a room with you. And not everyone, like you talk about diversity, like women feel more vulnerable than men. So why, I can't rely on my experience to be the same as a woman's. But it was very comforting to have like a little robot with you, or a little alien, or a little dinosaur creature, and people really responded to it in a very intense way. And the real life experiences, like before COVID, so it's not a COVID dog. I got my wife and I and my son got a dog, and it's this a dog is an alien intelligence. It is not a human, but it has chosen to live with you and has been evolved to overlap with our sense of our own space. And it shocked me how much I loved my dog. Like I used to like, oh, people compare their dogs to the children. That's not right. I still like, if I had to choose and the house was burning, I would save my son before my dog, but I would be wrecked over that choice, right? I would be in tears because I love my dog so much. And like, why do I love her so much? Does she love me? Like I ask my wife like my questions about my dog all the time. Like, does she love us? And because she has no language, we have to understand what she wants and how she feels in a way that is not native to us. So understanding that bridge, like, is great for games, right? The games are all about solving puzzles, like gleaning the state of the world from hints. Like there's no one-click win for games, like there is in Amazon. Like every time you click one-click buy, Jeff Bezos wins. So so this idea of creating a virtual pet with an AI that is somewhat inscrutable, but it has chosen to be related to the player, was really powerful. And we built a virtual pet demo at Meta at Oculus, and people loved it. It's called BOGO, and they took it off the store. But and because they took it off the store, because there's no team to maintain it anymore, my old team is gone. Pages and pages of reviews of like, I love games, but BOGO was different. Like BOGO was a friend, and to me, what I think we get right, although the market will tell us that a lot of the LLM friend bots get wrong, is friendship is not about a one-way relationship where I'm querying an LLM about like, how do you feel, or do you love me, or take off your clothes, like all these things that I think are like LLM chatbots, or there's like sex versions of them. They're one-way relationships, right? They are there to sort of serve you. Switch to a friend or a dog, like they are there to make you happy some of the time, but they like also demand to be made happy, right? If I didn't treat my dog well, or my wife well, or my friends well, like they wouldn't stay my friends. And there are things that they want to do that I may not want to do, but I do them because it is our shared purpose. Like if you have a partner and you're always like, hey, what do you want for dinner? Like, I don't know, what do you want for dinner? Like there's always this friction of like aligning your interests together. And to me, that's what friendship is about, right? Is about this sort of, one person's needs, another person's needs, a common goal, and problems to solve together, right? And to me, that's what we are trying to deliver, this sort of wrapper of a semi-autonomous agent who cares about you, you care about it, you do things together, and you can do things together that you can't do alone. And to me, that's what's really powerful, right? And these are models of friendship, right? This is actually, there's lots of research on how friendships evolve, and mutual interdependence is one of them, right? Is I need you to help me do things, you need me to help you do things, we do things together. So like this is how friendships evolve, right? And I don't see how haven't seen a model of a chatbot LLM that does that, right? And what it does is magical, but I do not believe it actually is capable right now. It's not designed to become a friend, a real friend.
I feel you are so much kind of tapping into this thing of like, what is the function of AI? Because right now it is like everything, okay, you tell me. And then it's almost like a yes man, uh, for lack of a better diverse
Yeah.
word here as well. Because whatever you ask, it kind of agrees with you all the time. And friends don't, like real friends wouldn't necessarily do that. Or even the pet, if they're not happy, they're gonna like show it in some way of their own, in their own language of like, I'm not happy with this. Which is, you talk about that two-way street between in friendships, in even with pets. uh, and I'm sure that is really challenging to capture from a immersive experience perspective, from a technological implementation perspective. So um, how are you going about solving those design, immersive experience, and technology challenges with this startup?
I mean, part of it, I think, is friction is a feature, not a bug. And when you call the pet over and she looks at you and she doesn't respond right away, I'm fine with that, right? Like, might call my dog and she'll, most of the time she'll come. But if she's busy doing something, she's heard me, right? She knows what I want. She's not doing it. And that's okay. Like, then I've got to be patient, or I've got to reframe it, or I've got to give her a treat or do something, right? Like, there are, friction is a feature, not a bug. And I think that's, when you build friction and you build randomness and sort of variability, people, people read into it what they want, right? If I call the creature of the pet and she doesn't come over, I don't really know why. Like, maybe a bunch of priorities are stepping on each other, and we've got to resolve this priority queue inside its AI model. And I'm like, okay, I'll do this thing. But while it's stepping on each other, I don't know like what the AI is doing, but I tell a story. Like, it has other things it wants to do. It is interested in something else, and that's okay. Like, it's not deterministic. It doesn't have to behave the same way each time, right? In fact, that non-determinism is actually is good. So we embrace that, and I think that's very powerful for us. The challenge is to tune it so that it's non-deterministic in a range. Like, if it starts straying out of that range, then your believability decreases. So how do we manage that? And it's a constant, push-pull, whack-a-mole thing of tuning an emergent system. Like, emergent behavior is by definition like unpredictable. So how do we constrain it so it is predictable in a range that we care about? And I think that's the moat we have. Like, I think we're built a system that Meta or Google or Apple would be hard pressed to build internally, because the structures don't allow that. And we built it for a budget of like what it would cost Meta to have 6.5 E5s or E6s on payroll for a year, right? Like, if you took 6.5, 5 engineers and a PM and a designer, 7 people for a year, they couldn't build what we have. There's zero chance they would build what we have. Zero chance, right? In a year. So we're able to build that in a way that I think aligns to our organizational, structure and freedom and agility. And we're taking big risks. We're taking like big shots, right? That are that's what a startup is taking big shots. I don't think you can take big shots inside a company that, especially is laying off the bottom 5% of the company, or, and then I'm not calling out Meta alone, like Google and Apple potential layoffs, right? Like, are you going to take a big shot at this company? Like, and that could be maybe a half, you don't get a good review. No. Right? Let Bernie's company take the big shot. Maybe we can buy them or copy them or whatever it is, but let them take a big shot and we can learn from it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the startup.
Yeah. Wow. So big companies are technically making people more risk averse.
I think so.
And for a startup, being comfortable with risk taking is really important, because like, if you don't go for the moonshots, you just stay on Earth.
Yeah. Who's going to write you a check? No one's going to write you a venture funding check for if you're not going to promise 100x return. You want a shot at that, right? So
Yeah.
that's really important.
How do you see the company evolving from here on?
Oh, I'd like to be on multiple platforms. I don't think of ourselves as a VR company. I think of ourselves as a virtual pet company, and I want us to be on every possible platform, mobile, console, everywhere that you ever feel lonely and you want like your pet to check in on your pet and play with it. Like I want you to be able to do that. So I think the next step is to move to that. But that's a tomorrow problem. Like immediately we need to ship our games. We need to fix our bugs. We need to get stable enough. We need to build a community around it. So, you know, you have to think about the future and the present at the same time. And certainly that's my job as a CEO. I'm probably the main person who thinks about both those things. But my team is mostly focused on shipping the game, because you don't know your possibility space until you ship. When you ship and the world sees it, your possibility space like comes into focus, right? So until then, I'm kind of like, well, we'll see. Like I'm not gonna. It's not controllable until I know what the game looks like in shipping it. So that's the thing I want to control now.
Wonderful. Well, that's really great. Thank you so much for this great conversation. Any last words for the audience? Any piece of advice before we sign off?
No, I mean, I think being a CEO is hard. It is a thankless job, but it is also rewarding. People ask me if I'm having fun, and I don't think fun is the right word, but it is very rewarding. If you have a chance to do it, and you're in the financial place to do it, like I think it's thrilling. I think you're a way better employee afterwards, after going through this. But I think that's it. Like, I think, don't hold yourself into like one kind of role that you could find rewarding. Like, I think there are lots of ways to find meaning in your work. In the same way that I kind of stuck to playing games and other people did other things. Like, I think there are lots of ways to find meaning. And if you have the chance to, like, I think exploring that is really important.
Very well said. Thank you so much once again. I really enjoyed this conversation, and good luck to you and everyone at Windup Minds.
Thank you.
If today's conversation sparked new ideas or challenged your perspective, I'd love to hear from you. I work with tech leaders and founders to tackle complex challenges, whether it's scaling teams, making high-stakes decisions, or turning ambitious ideas into reality. If that sounds like something you are navigating, let's connect. Reach out via my website, thepriyankashinde.com, or find me on LinkedIn.